Hello and welcome to this tutorial called Learn Google Tag Manager by Example. Google Tag Manager is a tag management system which allows you to manage all your marketing pixels, your marketing tags such as Facebook pixel, AdWords conversion tags, AdWords remarketing tags, Criteo tags, all that kind of stuff which you need to put onto your website on a regular basis, but at the moment have to go through your developers to get it deployed. Well, Google Tag Manager allows you to do all of that right from your computer screen without having to get the developers involved. And the benefit of that is you get your marketing tags implemented how you want right away. So watch this tutorial in its entirety. We're going to go through some examples of how to do things like adding Google Analytics to your website, tracking a few events, tracking form submissions, and I'm going to also go through all the basic terminology you need to know, such as environments, workspaces, tags, triggers, variables. In part 2 of this course, we're going to cover some more advanced stuff. So we're going to look at the Facebook marketing pixel, we're going to look at custom tags, we're going to look at tracking e-commerce transactions, and we're also going to have a look at the data layer, which if you've been around digital marketing, you'll know is a hot topic right now, and it's very, very powerful when you combine it with Google Tag Manager. I've been using Google Tag Manager since it was released. I haven't just learned it yesterday and I'm giving you these tips. I genuinely do run public courses on Google Tag Manager. So the content I'm delivering here for you right now is worth quite a lot of money, and people pay hundreds of pounds to come along to the courses to learn it from me in person. So the content is valuable, I can promise you that. The first half of this tutorial will be absolutely free, and the second half I've decided to make a small fee so you can download it and you can watch it online. It won't be on YouTube, but the link to that part 2 will be in the form below, and that's going to be priced at about £15, which is roughly $20 US for an hour-long tutorial. That second half you'll get some great value from it. So without any further ado, let's get started on part 1, learning Google Tag Manager by example. The first step in the process is to create a Google Tag Manager account and container code. So head to tagmanager.google.com and you'll be presented with this screen where you're going to enter the name of the account. This is usually your company name. And you're also going to give your container a name. Now Google suggests a domain name, but personally I like to make my name the name of the website. So in this case, I'm going to call it GTM Training and Metric Mogul. This is going to be for a website. If you want to create a container for any of these other devices, that's fine, go ahead. But for the moment, we're going to stick with web. You'll be given this terms and services agreement. You click yes to that, otherwise you won't be able to go any further. Once you've created the container, you'll be presented with this screen which shows you the container JavaScript code. This is the code which will load the container onto every page of your website and ensure that Google Tag Manager is installed. Now, if you have access to the source code of your website, you are welcome to put this code onto the site yourself. But in our case, or in the case where you don't have access to your code, you have to do one of two things. Either you need to find a plugin for your website that will allow you to inject this code automatically, or secondly, you'll have to give these instructions to your developers to get them implemented. If you have WordPress, then you're in luck. There are lots of plugins out there which will help you inject this code onto your website. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do that. You want to head to your WordPress admin. You're going to go to plugins and add new. Once you're there, search for the Google Tag Manager for WordPress plugin. And the one you want is this one by Thomas Geiger. Hit the install button. And once it's installed, click activate. Once you're done, you'll see that the plugin is installed. You're going to go to the settings page. And in this box here is where you're going to type the ID of your Google Tag Manager container. So head back to the Google Tag Manager screen, and the container ID is this one here. So GTM 5MS PVXS in my case. We don't need this whole code because the WordPress plugin is doing that part for us. We just need the ID of the container. If you've closed this window accidentally, there are several ways to find the container code, but the easiest way is it's in the top right here of the screen. So I'm just going to paste that in there and leave these options as they are for the moment. Google does recommend putting the GTM container code in the head of your page, but by default this plugin injects it into the footer, which is fine for the moment. If you want to move things to the top, you have to make tweaks to your code. So we're not going to do that for the moment. In the meantime, save the changes, and you now have the Google Tag Manager installed on your website. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Google Tag Manager interface. Before we get started here, I want to give you a few little rundowns of some various things that you can find. Right now we're on the Workspace tab. The Workspace is where we're going to add all our tags to the container. The versions is going to show us any containers we've published. Just like when you're editing a document, you save it, you create a new version of that document. You do the same with your set of tags, so you can always go back to a previous version if you make a mistake. Admin is all about adding people to, changing your account settings, being able to manage users so you can give access to maybe your agencies to your container. And you can also do other things such as importing container code and exporting container code. Again, many of these functions are outside the scope of this tutorial. So let's head back to Workspace, and I'm going to give you a quick rundown of some of the key screens. Google Tag Manager is pretty simple and straightforward once you know what you're doing, but you need to know what these different sections are. So first of all, we have tags. Now, a tag is a marketing tag. It refers to the bit of JavaScript which you get given by marketing technologies, such as a Facebook pixel, an AdWords conversion tag, a Google Analytics tag. These are all known as marketing tags or marketing pixels. And those are the things that GTM was built for, to deploy those onto your website. So that's where these tags are going to go. Now bear in mind, you can also use Google Tag Manager to inject raw HTML and JavaScript onto your page. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a tag, a marketing tag that you've been given by an external company. You can write your own code as well. Next up, we have triggers. Now, triggers are the thing which dictate when a tag will fire. Think of it as a set of rules to say, I want this tag to fire on this page, or I want this tag to fire when someone does this interaction on my site, or I want to fire this tag when someone clicks or submits a form. The triggers are just the conditions you're going to attach to tags to make them fire when appropriate. So let me give you a concrete example here. When you get an AdWords or a Facebook conversion pixel, you generally want to put those onto the pages, your sales confirmation page. So once someone has converted, if your website is a lead generation site, then maybe you put that on the thank you page once someone has submitted a form. If you're an e-commerce site, then you would want to have this on the transaction page after someone has purchased. So you would create a trigger, a rule, think of it as a rule that says only fire my tags, my Facebook and my AdWords conversion tags, once someone lands on the thank you page or the sales confirmation page. Let me give you an example of another trigger. For Google Tag Manager, for Google Analytics tag, you want that tag to fire on every single page of your website. So you have to still create a trigger, but the trigger is going to be much more general, and it's going to say fire this tag on all pages. So the trigger will be set up for all pages. And as you'll see as we go through this course, triggers can get pretty complicated. you can say, if someone clicks a button on this specific page, then fire a tag. So that's triggers. Next up, we have variables. Now, variables may not make sense until we get to use them, and once you see me using them, it'll make sense. But essentially, think of variables as values which can change. Again, let me try and make this concrete for you. When someone clicks on a link, for example, Google Tag Manager have several built-in variables that are collected about that event. So when someone clicks on a link, you might record the URL that the link was sending someone to. You might also record the div class element, the div class of the element that was clicked on. So those would be two examples of variables, and they're variables because if you have 10 links on a page, the click URL is going to change depending on which of those elements you click on. So if we wanted to use that click URL in a tag, it has to be dynamic. It has to change depending on what the user has clicked on. So that is variables. And finally, folders is a way of organizing your tags into structures that make sense. You can organize your variables and your triggers. Part of being in charge of Google Tag Manager is managing users. If you need to add people to your account so that they can edit and make changes, you can do that on the admin screen, either at the account level or at the container level. So both work the same way. If you give someone access to an account, they get access to all of your containers within that account. If you just give someone a user access at the container level, they will only have access to this one particular container. So let's do that now. I'm going to come into user management and I'm going to add a new user, and that person is going to be myself, another email address. And the various permissions we can have read, so we'll only be able to see stuff in there, see the tags, we can't change anything. Edit, of course, is to be able to make changes. Approve and publish mean that we can approve changes that have been made and we can publish them to the live website. So depending on who you want to give access to, publish is obviously the highest access. And if you just want very basic access to someone to see how GTM is set up, you give them read. So read is the lowest level of access, publish is the highest. I'm going to give myself publish access. And if I go back in, I can see that I have publish access now. So I can log in with either of my accounts and I can make changes to the container. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to implement Google Analytics through Google Tag Manager. This is an example of a basic tag setup. So first of all, I'm going to assume that you have a Google Analytics account. If you don't, it doesn't matter, just watch along and you'll get the understanding of how the process of creating tags within Google Tag Manager works. I've also created a fake website here, which is about GTM training. So the first thing is you're going to go to Google Tag Manager and we're going to create a new tag here. So go to the tag screen, create a new tag, give your tag a name of GA base tag. GA stands for Google Analytics. And the process is quite simple. Firstly, we need to configure the tag, and then the second step is set our triggers as to when this tag should fire. So let's start with the tag configuration. Clicking on this will bring up you a list of options of all the kind of tags that we can add. Now you can see there's some third-party tags here, such as Crazy Egg or Ad Roll. The list goes on. You've got some Twitter tags here as well. And at the top, obviously featured are the ones by Google. In our case, we want Universal Analytics, which is the newer version of Google Analytics, certainly in 2017 when this video was recorded. Once you've selected your tag type, you'll notice that you're given certain options to configure this tag. And the main one is the tracking ID. What is the ID that we want to send data to? Which GA property are we sending data to? To find out this number, you need to go back into your Google Analytics account. You need to go to the admin screen and then to property settings. And in here, you'll find your tracking ID. Once you've got that, copy and paste it, head back, and you're going to paste it into the box. Next up, we've got the track type. Within Google Analytics, you can obviously track transactions, you can track various other things, events. But in our case, because this is a basic implementation of Google Analytics, we want to track all page views. Leave the more settings and advanced settings for later. We'll come back to those, or this is beyond the scope of this tutorial. So our tag is now configured. We now need to set a trigger. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to trigger this tag whenever someone loads any page of the website. So let's click the triggering, and you'll notice that Google Analytics has a default trigger that you don't need to set up. It's already there for you, called all pages. And just as I explained, this will trigger on every single page of your website, which is exactly what we want. Hit the save button, and you will now see in the table your tag, GA-based tag, is implemented and ready to go. Before you get too excited and you go loading your website expecting the tag to appear, there's one thing you should know. This change is not yet live. It's just think of it as a draft version of our container. It only goes live and is only pushed to the website when you click this publish button. But obviously, there's a chance that we have made a mistake here. So we want to debug before we push this thing live. Especially important if you work on a large website. You don't want to push any JavaScript or any code live to your website that could potentially break it. There's a very, very low risk of a basic Google Analytics tag breaking your site. But if you were adding a more complex tag, this is the process you should go through. So how do we debug and make sure that this tag is working properly? Here are the steps you should go through to debug your tags before you put them live onto the website. First of all, instead of clicking the publish button, hit the red down arrow next to it, and you're going to go to preview and debug and click this preview box. GTM will then reload, and at the top you'll see a little banner which says you are working in preview mode. Don't worry, this hasn't yet gone live to our site, but GTM will now know that we are in debug mode, so that when we load the website in our browser, it will put the tags onto the site as though it was live, but just for us. So let me show you that. I'm going to refresh my website. And after it loads, you'll see that we get this extra Google Tag Manager debugging window down the bottom here. And what you want to look for is in this summary screen, tags fired on this page section. You can see that we only have one tag, the Google-based tag, and it has fired, which is exactly what we wanted. Now, when Google Tag Manager loads, it goes through these various stages. Again, these not really within the scope of this training, but the page view is when the page loads. The DOM ready is when all the elements and everything on it has loaded. And then finally the window load. So these get fired in this order, and we can see that our base tag is firing on this second step on the page view, which is why when you click DOM ready, you don't get the event fired, and when you click window loaded, you don't get the event fired. It is fired on this page view, and the summary is just showing a summary of all the tags that fired at any of these stages. We'll come back to what these other two tabs are in a later tutorial. One more way of checking and debugging that things are working, you can click onto this tag and you can see a few of the properties of this tag, so we can check that our UA number which we inputted is correct, and all of these other things are other properties of this tag which we didn't set for the moment because we just wanted to keep things nice and simple. But if you do have a more complex tag, you can click on it and see what is going on. I'm now going to demonstrate how to create a more advanced Google Analytics implementation by tracking certain things about the website which you don't get with just page views. Now again, this may not be relevant to you if you're not using Google Analytics, but it'll give you a good idea of how to create more complex triggers, how to use variables, and how to set up tags. So do keep watching. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to track outbound links. So right here, I have a fake link called outbound link, which takes me to Google. Now I want to know when people are leaving my website. So whenever someone clicks that, I'm going to fire an event into Google Analytics and record it, along with the name of the link that was clicked. So for those of you who are familiar or unfamiliar with Google Analytics, whenever you fire an event and you record an event, you can record 3 attributes along with it: the category of the event, the action of the event, and the label of the event. You get to choose exactly what these are, but in my case, I'm going to set the category to interactions, the action to outbound link clicked, and the label to the ID, or the URL of the link that was clicked. So let's get started. I want to explain something called auto event tracking. And for that, we need to know a little bit about how browsers work. Whenever you click something in a browser, there's a signal given off by the browser. And if you use some JavaScript, you can detect those signals and then take action based on them. Now, Google Tag Manager in the background is doing that. It's listening for things like clicks. It's listening for things like form submissions. And those are known as auto event tracking. So we can set up Google Tag Manager to listen for those events and then perform certain actions on them. So that's exactly what we're going to do right now. But first, we need to pick up the click URL. This is the URL that is going to be clicked when someone clicks on a link. So head over to the Variables tab, and under Built-in Variables, click Configure. And you'll see lots of built-in variables here, but the one we're interested in is click URL. This is going to tell me the URL of the link or the element that is clicked on. So once you've done that, you'll see it appear in the table. And now let's go to triggers. So we're going to set up a new trigger, and this is going to be called outbound link clicked. And what are we going to do in this trigger? Well, this trigger is going to use one of the auto events that GTM has. Now it's got several. It can do things when the page has loaded. It can do things when the window is loaded. It can do things when you click on elements or links, when you submit forms, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But we just want to track outbound links. So just links is the trigger type you want to go for. And we don't want this tracking all links because obviously we've got some internal links on the website. And if you click those, we don't want this event firing. We only want to specify it down to outbound links. So click the Some Link Clicks radio button. And how do we know if this is an outbound link or not? Well, quite simply, it's an outbound link if the click URL, so the link that was clicked on, does not contain our domain name. All right, pretty standard rule. So we're going to choose click URL. You've got access to all the other variables here, but for the moment, it's just click URL. And we're going to select does not contain, and then I'm going to put in my domain name. Save that. And now you can see we have our trigger here. So we've got our trigger. Next up, we need to create our event tag, the thing that's going to send the event to Google Analytics. So create a new tag, and I'm going to call this GA. I like to preface my tags with the name of the tool that the data is being sent to, and outbound link clicked, and I'm going to call it event. Under tag configuration, just as we did before, we want to select Universal Analytics. Once again, we need our tracking ID, so I'm going to head back into the Google Analytics admin, select my tracking ID, and pop it in there. And track type, this time instead of page view, we're going to select event. Now, when you select event, you'll be brought up with these extra parameters. Again, this is more to do with Google Analytics, so if you're familiar with Google Analytics, you'll know that an event needs a category and action. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you can have whatever values you want in here, but I want to call this interactions, and the action is outbound link clicked. Now, the label, I said we want to know which link has been clicked on, so we want the URL in here. But rather than type in a static value, that could change. If the link URL changes or someone clicks on a different link, this is going to need to be dynamic, which is where we bring in variables. So instead of using a hard-coded value, we're going to inject a variable. And that's what this Lego icon, this brick icon does. Click on that, you'll bring up your list of variables, and we want to select click URL. Okay. Now notice that you've got these double curly braces around click URL. That means that when this runs, this whole value will be replaced with the value of the link, the click URL. So whatever value is in that variable at the time will be replaced and injected in here. Right, once that's done, the rest of the settings are absolutely fine. We just need our trigger. We've created it earlier, so click on the triggering and you'll see our two triggers now. And we're going to select outbound link clicked. Save that. And now we have to go through the debugging process once again. So just to recap, hit the down arrow, click preview and debug. The container will now go into the new and updated preview mode. Head back to the website. And I am going to refresh. Well, actually, before I refresh, I'm going to go to this post because I know this post has some outbound links. If I can find them, here we go. Here we go. We've got one internal link, one external link. So I'm going to have a look at my debugger. You can see now that although the page has loaded, we've fired the base tag, but we haven't yet fired this tag, which is good because we shouldn't have because we haven't clicked an outbound link. You can click on it to see more information about why it hasn't fired. So if you look down here, you can see there's these are the rules we set up and it hasn't executed yet. So I'm now going to click this. This is an outbound link. I'm going to click this. It's going to open a new page. But if I go back to my original page, you'll now see that we have this thing up here. Just need to get back where I was. You have this thing number 5. So we've got an extra event, gtm.linkClick. This is one of those auto events that I was telling you about. GTM has detected that a link has been clicked and has given us this option. So if we click on this, you'll see tags fired on this event. It now shows us that our GA outbound link clicked event has worked and it's been clicked and has fired successfully to Google Analytics. If you go to the summary, you'll see both tags have fired by this stage. So remember that we have this variable called click URL, which we're using. If you want to see the values that GTM thinks the variables are, you can go to the variables tab. And I'm going to select one of my events, scroll down, and you can see click URL here is set to google.co.uk. Why? Because this link is sending people to google.co.uk. So we now know that our variables are set correctly, which should mean, if you go back to the tabs, click on the GA outbound link clicked event tag, show more, and you'll see here event action is set to outbound link clicked, event category to interactions, but most importantly, our click URL for the event label has been replaced and we have the correct value in there. So, moral of the story is, you don't just have to check that the tags are fired, you also need to check that the variables you injected into the tags are being set correctly. If you are sending data to Google Analytics, another way to make absolutely sure that your tags are working is to use the real-time reports. So in here I've gone to real-time reports, events, and I can see that my outbound link click event action is happening. I'm going to click the link again, let it load, and you'll see here we get a hit coming into the server to tell us that the event has been recorded. And if we drill into this event, you'll see here that the event label is being set correctly. So now we know we've debugged it through Google Tag Manager debugger, and we've also debugged it by looking at the marketing tool that we were sending data to and making sure the data is arriving correctly. to cement in your brains just how easy Google Tag Manager is to use, we're going to do one more example of using auto event tracking, this time with a form. When someone submits our form and fills it in, we want to send an event to Google Analytics telling us that that has been the case. So here's a contact form page. Here's my form. Again, this is done through WordPress. I'm using the Contact Form 7 WordPress plugin. And I know that that doesn't really matter though, but I know that this form, once it's submitted, Google Tag Manager will be able to fire a form submission event. So let's head back to Google Tag Manager. And we're going to head back to the Variables tab, first of all, because we need to configure some built-in form variables. So hit the Configure button, scroll all the way down to Form Elements, and I'm going to turn on Form ID. Why? Because I want to know, just like we did with the outbound link click, we wanted to know which outbound link click was being clicked. In this case, I want to know which form is being submitted because I might have multiple forms on my website. So I'm going to put the form ID into the Google Analytics event label. Hence why I need to turn on this form ID variable. So once that's on, head over to triggers and we're going to create a new trigger called form submitted. Now click on trigger configuration and look down the list. It's fairly obvious that the one we want is form submission. So click on that. And I'm going to leave this on all forms because I want to track all the forms on my website. If you have a website where there are thousands of forms, then obviously you may want to select some forms. And just as we did before, you could select, I only want to submit this event or trigger this event when form ID equals whatever, migrate form. All right. So you can do that, but in this case, I don't want that. I want to trigger it on all forms. So these two options here, the wait for tags might be useful if when you submit the form, you are taken to a new page. By clicking this, this is essentially saying, I want you to wait a few milliseconds before you take me to the new page to give the marketing tags a chance to fire. It's kind of, obviously, if you wait 2 seconds before moving it on, the user may experience a bit of a delay, which is bad for the user experience. So I would recommend testing your tag without ticking this first of all. If it works, great. If not, you may want to come in here, reconsider turning that on. So once you've saved your trigger, it's now time to create the tag. So head back to the tags section. Click new, and again, just as before, I'm going to prefix this with GA because I like to prefix my tags with the marketing tool that I'm sending data to, and I'm going to call this form submitted event. Right, tag configuration, you've been through this twice now, it's very easy. You select Universal Analytics. Tracking ID, once again, got to go find. Here it is. Now, before we go any further, why don't we create a variable to hold our tracking ID? Because otherwise, every time we create one of these Universal Analytics tags, we're going to have to keep doing that process of copying in and pasting our tracking ID. And what happens in the future if we change our GA property? If we want to move to a new GA account, we're going to have to go through all our tags and change them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to come in here and I click the plus button up here. And I'm going to call this variable GA property ID. Click the variable configuration, and this is just going to be a constant value. It's not going to change, so scroll down to utilities constant and paste in your UA value. Hit save again, and once we've done that, you can see that rather than having to paste in our dynamic value or static value, we're now using a user-defined variable called GA property ID. We can tell it's a variable because it's surrounded by these double curly braces. So next up, we want to select event as the track type, and I'm going to call this, give it a category of leads. The action is going to be form submitted, and with 1D because submitted is spelt with 1D. And label is going to be the form ID, as I said. So go back into your variables, select form ID, Once again, the double curly braces indicate and show us that this is a dynamic variable. Value we can leave blank, and it's on to the triggers. So click the triggers. Once again, this has already been created for us, and we just created it. I'm going to select the form submitted trigger, click save, and we are hopefully ready to go. So again, the process is next up to debug. So hit the preview button, wait for it to load, head to your website, refresh the page, that's important, refresh the page, and I'm going to fill in my details here. Test from GTM, blah, blah, blah. Excellent. So I'm going to send this now, and you can see that right away in our debugger, we get this gtm.formSubmit, and form submit is one of those auto events that I told you about that GTM is listening for. And our form submitted event is firing. And once again, I can look into real-time reports into GA, and we'll see that we have this form submitted leads, and head into this. And we've also picked up the event label. Now, the reason it's not set in this case is because if we have a look at the variables tab in GTM, you'll see that my form doesn't have an ID. All right, so I don't have an ID. So in that case, you could either get your developers to add an ID to this form, or we should probably use one of these other properties. So maybe we should change it to click URL here. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to head back into my tag, edit the properties, and instead of form ID, I'm going to change it to click URL. So you can see there how we've used kind of a combination of debugging to work out if the values are being pulled into variables in GTM correctly, and if they're not, we can use other ones, or we need to get the developers to do some work and change the HTML on the page to include things like IDs and classes, which we can then use within Google Tag Manager. So a top tip is the better marked up your HTML is, the more success you are going to have at creating tags without having to go back to the developers. So I'm just going to save that, and there we go. You are now tracking outbound links, and you're also tracking your form submissions on your websites, and you have GTM implemented, so you're getting all those good metrics like visits and page views. You can see what people are doing on the website. And we've done all that in probably about half an hour. I mean, obviously, if you were doing this by yourself, it would probably take 10 minutes to set up. But obviously, because it's a tutorial, it's taken a little longer. But hopefully, you'll now understand why GTM is so powerful, because you can do all this stuff as a marketer without having to get the development team involved. There's no more delays. You are in control of everything, and you can start putting in your marketing tags and set them up exactly how you want to get accurate and fast data now.
Folders are needed when you have large numbers of tags, large number of triggers, and you're trying to keep things organized. Now there's several different ways you can organize your folder structure, and it kind of depends on what you're doing and how you want to work. But my two recommendations would either be to group folders by people. So if you have a lot of people working on your account, group the tags into the responsibilities. So you might have one for email marketing tags, and the email marketing team is in control of that. You might have one for analytics, so on-site analytics tools, and all of those go into that folder. Another way, you might want to just group things by tags. So all tags go in one place, all triggers go in another place, all variables go in another place. Personally, I like the system of keeping tag types grouped together. So in this case, I might create a new folder for Google Analytics. And all my Google Analytics related tags I'm going to put in there. And this is why I like to prefix everything with GA, because it makes it easy to do this kind of stuff. And this variable as well is related to GA. So all of that stuff I'm going to move into my Google Analytics folder. Okay, so we've got a few stuff here. So I might do custom triggers like so, and these form submitted and outbound link clicked both go into there. And finally, I might have one for custom variables, just because I don't want this one feeling left out. So that neatens things up a little bit. So I know now if ever I need to make some changes to Google Analytics, or there's a bug in Google Analytics code, I know I have to come in here and I can see all the tags responsible for that. Yep, it does take a bit of work to get these folder structures right and manage this stuff. It's not necessary if you are a one-man band with a small WordPress site, but as soon as you get to a site where you have hundreds, perhaps thousands of tags running, then folders become very important to use correctly. So right now we've been debugging and testing everything in our local version of GTM, but the changes we've made are not yet live on the website. To make that happen, we need to publish this container rather than just preview it. And to do that, you come up here and hit the publish button. Now in this publish box, you'll see all the changes that have been made to this workspace right now by yourself and by anyone else who has access to this account. You can also see a list of all the activity that's happened in the past few days. Once you're happy with this, it's best to give your version a name. So I'm going to call this version 1 and give your container a description. This will help people who are looking back and want to know why you've published stuff or why you've made changes, how this container differs from the other one. A brief description about what you've done makes sense. So I might write added Google Analytics plus a few events. And for the moment, we're going to leave this published to environment live. We don't have any other environments apart from live yet, but we'll cover this in a little while. So when you're ready, hit the publish button. And we're now given a summary of version 1 of this container. The name I used probably wasn't the best because GA automatically knows it's version 1, so you might want to call this something else. But we can see there all the changes that we made. Now when we go back to Workspace, you'll see that we're still in preview mode, but on our website, this container is now live. All the tags that we've created over the past few minutes or few days are now live on the site. Within each container, you can create multiple workspaces. Workspaces are very useful when you have multiple teams or multiple people working on the same container, adding tags, making changes. Maybe perhaps you've got one team that is responsible for your on-site analytics and another team that is responsible for your AdWords and Facebook tags. You could set them up each with a workspace so they can make changes independently of each other, and then you could merge them together at a later stage. So to create a new workspace, you click on the default workspace We've got 2 workspaces. You can create up to 3 here. I'm going to create a new one, and let's call this, let's suppose we had a Facebook agency working with us, and they were going to be responsible for adding Facebook marketing tags. Right, save this. And now we've got our 2 workspaces. We're currently in the Facebook agency workspace, but we can change between the 2 just as easy as clicking on those 2. Now, if we created any more tags in the Facebook agency, so let's pretend they added a Facebook conversion pixel. All right, so I'm not actually going to add a Facebook conversion pixel for the moment, but we'll just pretend that we've got one in here. For the moment, I'm just going to log Facebook code like this. Again, this isn't the real Facebook code. I'm just doing this as a demonstration, and we're going to fire this on all pages just for the sake of it. Okay, so now we've got our Facebook conversion pixel in our Facebook agency workspace. But if we click back to our default workspace, you'll see that the tag is not there because it's only in one of those 2 tags. Now, let's say concurrently we've got people working on this default workspace, and they've implemented a new GA event. All right, so they're adding a new event. We're going to go through the same process of adding a tag here. I'm just going to add test. All right, and this is going to fire on every single page. Actually, do you know what? Let's not do it on every page. Let's just add it on a form submitted. Again, not a very useful event, but I'm just demonstrating it here. So in the default workspace, we've got one new tag called GA test event. And in the Facebook agency workspace, we have one new tag, which is the Facebook conversion pixel. And I can see on the overview screen, the workspace changes here for this one. And in the default workspace, we've got the workspace change right here. Okay, so now let's pretend that the Facebook agency have finished their container. They've made all the changes they want, and they go ahead and publish their tags to the live container, the live environment. If we go back, we'll see this is all absolutely fine, but now we're in the default workspace. You can see we get this little message saying that a new container version is available. So this is telling us that something has changed in another workspace, and that workspace has been published, so the container is now different. And you can see again, one workspace change here. Now, of course, you don't have to do the merge at this point. You can continue to add more and more tags, but before you publish this to the website, you're going to have to merge in the changes that other people have made in other workspaces. To do that, we just hit update workspace. You'll be able to see which versions have not been merged. So we can see this is the Facebook agency workspace, which needs to be merged in, and we're going to update that. And once that is done, if we go back to the tags, you'll see now that it has brought in the Facebook conversion pixel from the other workspace, and we still have our original one as well. Once that's done, we can just publish everything as normal, and both tags will be live on the website. Once the workspace, the Facebook workspace, has been merged and published and merged together with the default workspace, it disappears. So there is just one work stream left, because there's no need for the other one because they're both identical. So if the Facebook team now want to make more changes, they would have to create a new workspace. Let's talk a little bit about environments. If you go to admin and then down to environments, you'll see that by default we've got the live environment, and we've also got the latest. This is what we've just published. So you use environments when you're perhaps a larger company and you have some developers working on a website in their own environment, their own development environment. And then typically the workflow would next be that you publish this development code to a staging server so that you can run quality assurance on it. So that's known as the dev staging site, the dev site. So you have the dev site, the staging site, and then after all the tests have been completed, it gets pushed to the live site. So we might be in a situation where we've released some new features in the dev site or the staging site, and we want to tag those up to fire events into Google Analytics. But those features are not yet available on the live environment. So we don't want to add our tags to the live environment. We only want to add them to the development environment. So I'm going to show you how to do that. If you work on large sites, it's best to create a dev and potentially a QA environment as well. For the moment, I'm just going to create a dev environment. We're going to enable debugging. This gives us a bit more information to work out when our tags are firing and if there are any problems with them. And I put in my URL like that. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to use my real URL, which is the same as the live site. But you can pretend that this is the URL of the staging site. As this notice indicates, there are two ways that we can access this new dev environment we've just created. We can either do it with a share preview link, or we can add a snippet onto our dev page, which will inactivate and activate this dev environment. So I'm going to show you how to do both of those now. Right now it's asking me if I want to publish the changes that are in the live container, the live staging environment, to the dev. This is probably what we want to do because we want to start the dev environment off as the live site is right now. So I'm going to publish version 1 of my container to the dev site. And there we go. We've now got two environments, the dev environment and the live environment. And they're both on version 1 of the container, which means right now they're exactly the same. They're both sets of tags, both sets of triggers, both sets of variables in both containers on the live and the dev site are identical. So now we've got our two environments. How do we switch between them? Well, if you click the dev environment here, this will bring up a pop-up box with the share link. And if you paste this link into your browser, you'll be given a message saying that your browser is now in preview and debug mode, which is the mode we've been using for the other earlier part of this tutorial. But we're now in the dev environment of this container rather than the live environment. So now when I head to the website, I am now in the dev environment. Remember, the dev environment right now has all the same tags as the standard environment, the live environment, but we can change that. So to switch back, I can come back in here, I can click on live and do exactly the same thing, this time copying the share link of the live environment. And I'll get a notice now saying I'm now in preview and debug mode for the live environment. The other way, because this is a hassle, you know, if you're a developer and you constantly are working for months on end on your development environment, you don't want to have to keep doing this switching. So what you can do is under this actions here, you can get a snippet. Now this snippet is basically the same as the JavaScript code to install the container onto the website, except there's a few extra parameters here. So what we would do is we would take off our current container code from the website and instead we would deploy this new one. And you can see these extra parameters here. We can see the GTM preview is set, and these parameters here will make sure that we go into the dev environment, not the live environment, every time we load the page. So there's two options to use there, depending on how your website is set up and what your workflow is like. So how do we now create tags and publish them to the dev environment rather than the live environment? Well, head back to your workspace. And to test this, I'm going to create a new variable I'm going to create a new user-defined variable, and I'm going to call this environment test. And I'm going to configure this variable as a constant, and I'm going to set this value to dev. And I only want this, actually let's just call it environment. I only want this variable to be set to dev when I'm in the dev website. So let's save that. All right. You can ignore this not found message. It keeps popping up for the moment. So we've got this environment constant, and I'm now going to preview and debug this. All right, so again, this variable's only been added to my local computer right now, but when I hit the publish button, I can choose now which environment I want to publish this to. At the moment it's set to live, but I'm going to instead publish it to my development. So I'm going to write here environ, oops, can't spell. Good old spell checker, eh? I'm going to leave the description for the moment, and we're now publishing to dev. So let's go ahead and publish that. All right, we'll head back to the workspace, and I'm going to preview and debug this. And now head back to my website here. And what we're going to do is going to have a look in the variables table to see if that has appeared. Now we've got environment set to dev. So this would indicate that we're on the dev version of the container code. But are we really? Well, let's have a look. I am going to go back into GTM here, into the admin, into the environments. I'm going to choose the share link for the live container, or the live environment. I'm going to have a look at this one. All right, so I'm now in preview mode for the live container. Head back to the website. And now when we have a look at the environment variables, or in the variables table, you'll see that the environment variable is not there because we're looking at the live container, the live environment, and the live environment does not yet have that change that we made on the dev environment. So if we make some more changes and then we're happy with our dev environment, you can see here dev is on version 2, whereas the live site is still on version 1. So we now need to bring the live environment up to date with the with version 2 of the container. Doing that is as simple as heading back to our workspace, and we're going to publish right now. You can see publish to environment live. Add same notes, going to live, and let's publish that. All right, so here we are. Let's head back to the website. And before we do that, let's preview and debug the workspace to make sure we're looking at the right version. And then reload the website. Now when we look at the window loaded, you will see in the variables table we have the environment of dev. So we've published our changes to the live environment. The container is now the same on the dev site and on the live site, but obviously we wouldn't do this in real life because we don't want this value to be dev, we want it to be live on the live site. So that's something we could change at a future date, but just know now that the two environments are the same. That's the end of part 1. I hope you've got some fantastic benefits out of watching this first part, and you now know what you need to do and how to install and use Google Tag Manager. If you're interested in doing some of the more advanced stuff, such as scraping data from the page, installing custom tags, installing your Facebook pixels. You want to learn more about the data layer and how you can really do things like scroll tracking, e-commerce tracking, form tracking, and take your tag management skills to another level, to a kind of professional level, then you really need to check out part 2. Check the description for the link. It's a paid for tutorial, but you'll get some amazing benefit out of it. So take a look at part 2, and I'll catch up with you soon.